Hi there. This is a screencast for the course 4 ME 104 Social Media Ecosystems. My name is Oskar Pettersson, and all of the material you see in this screencast is available on GitHub in the URL you see here. So, the thing I will be presenting today is one of the prototypes that we will show during today's workshop, and this is the we call it trending topics or trending topics, depending on what you prefer. And this is a very simple prototype. It's consisting of 3 services and a mashup service, so to say. And I think we should start in the index.php. I think we just go from there. So, what we have here is some JavaScript to make it all go around. We should ignore this for now because it's just fancy things. So, how this essentially works is that we create or instantiate a new mashup service and put that in the service variable. We then get the trends from the service with the getTrends function, and we then pick out a random trend from the trends that we got from the trend service, and this is done because we don't want to spam the APIs that we're using in this mashup. So we're just asking the succeeding APIs for one trend that they announce, one trend. We then get the semantical enrichment, that I call it, for this particular trend, and we also get the pictures for that particular trend. And the rest of this is just a printout so that we see anything on the page. If you're interested in how that works, you can just download it from GitHub and play around with it. So I thought we should start going through the services. So the whole mashup service, as I call it, is basically just a wrapper service for all of the 3. And what you need in order to get this to work in your home machine are these 3 keys or API keys. You will get these from their respective website of the different APIs. So it's Whatthetrend+OpenCalais and the Flickr API. And there are links in the documentation on GitHub, so it shouldn't be any big problems. We also have a trend array, where we put all the trends that we get from Whatthetrend. And we also have 3 variables containing the different services that we instantiate during the instantiation of the mashup service, which is here. So you see that we instantiate each service by simply instantiating a new service, and we send in the respective key to the different services, otherwise the services won't work. We have 7 different functions in this particular service, and these are the get trends, which you saw in the previous, in the index.php, and this essentially just gets the trends from the trend service and put them in the trends array, meaning that we then can get to them either via accessing the array directly or just asking for a random trend, which is what we're doing in this example, seeing as most APIs have a limit for how much you can actually call them during a day if you're not paying, and we're not paying. We also have a dump trends function, which is nothing but actually just dumping the trends for output, so you can see what you have actually gotten. We have get enrichment for trend, which calls the enrichment API, which is OpenCalais, and it generates tags that will make our search on Flickr more accurate, so we get pictures not only depicting, say, the country that the tweet is trending in, but we also get different categories of things, for example, politics or sports or whatever. We also have this in plural. If you want to, this takes an array instead of just an object, but it does the same thing basically. We also have to get images for trend, where we get the images based on the tags that we provided from the enrichment functions. And we also have this get random trend, of course, which just takes a random trend and returns it to us. So let's dig down into the services. We should start with the trend service. Yeah. So what we have here is all of the three services that actually connects to external APIs are rather similar. And that's because they're all using REST and we're getting back JSON from all of them. Which means that, well, you would think that the calls would be the same, but they're obviously not, because REST is not, standardized in that way. So what we have here is that we have a base URL. We instantiate a new REST client with a base URL, and we then set some options. In this case, we set the API key, and we get the API key from the class. We then ask the REST client to make a GET request to this particular URL on top of the base URL, and then we will get the result back, in this variable, and it's an object, actually a result object. And to get the response from the API, we actually have to call the result response. So the responses will end up in this responses variable, which we then check for, if the HTTP code that we got back was less than 400. And if you don't know what HTTP codes are, Google it, because it's not in the scope of this particular screencast. But let's just say that if it's over 400, it's bad. We then go through all the trends that we got, and we put each of them into a trend object. And then we put the trend object in the trends array, which is then returned when the function is done. So when the function is done, we will have an array full of trend objects. Then semantic enrichment function looks about the same, just different headers and options. But since I explained the trend service, you will understand basically what's going on. So I won't go through that in that much detail. We also have the image service, which also looks about the same. The special with this one is that we have to have a function called toFlickr URL, which is because when you request images from Flickr, it will not return to you the URL. It will return to you a bunch of parameters, and then you will have to put together these to make your own URL, which is what we have here. So this function basically just takes all these parameters and makes a URL out of them to make it an image, or URL to an image. And the last thing is the trend object, of course, which is, if you know anything about object-oriented programming, this is very simple. You have a bunch of variables inside of the object, which are filled at instantiation of the object. And we have a toString function, which just helps us with debugging, or if you want to output the particular trend. We then have an add tag and add image function for this. Okay, that was my demo. And as I said, if you want to see this code in its entirety and download it, play around with it for yourself, you can go to GitHub and just download it as a zip file. Thank you for listening.